Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast, brought to you by BuckeyeHuddle.com. I'm Mark Givler, joined by Kevin Noon today. Things are about to really pick up with recruiting. Ohio State's going to kick off spring football practice here in less than a week, which means visitors, which means activity, commitments, narrowing lists, setting official visits, et cetera, et cetera. We're already starting to see that as other programs have kicked off spring football, have had prospects on campus. Ohio State lands one commitment, loses two in-state targets to Clemson. We're going to go through all of that on this episode and just kind of basically answer the question, what is going on right now in Ohio? Because there's a lot happening in Ohio right now, some good, some bad. So we're going to dive into that here on this episode. But first, let's talk about the good news, which was the commitment of Max Riley. Certainly among the top two or three targets for the Buckeyes in Ohio in this class. Very long time target, was offered very early in the process. Obviously, Chris Henry Jr. no longer being an Ohio prospect. I would argue Max Riley and Elbert Hill have been the two guys Ohio State has most focused on in the state of Ohio in terms of the 2026 class. They do land him. It was Ohio State or Clemson. There was a lot of back and forth there on where he was actually leaning, and Justin Fry leaves. What was that going to do to this situation? But ultimately, the Buckeyes able to land his commitment. So first of all, Kevin, just your thoughts on the importance of landing Max Riley as we talk about the importance of this offensive line class as a whole.
Well, and that's the thing, the importance of this offensive line class. And, oh, my goodness, all of this talent is in state, and Ohio State was sitting there with zero. And, I'm not going to say that people were calling for Tyler Bowen's head or anything like that, but it was a lot of what's going on. And, we'll get into what's going on here as the show goes on. But, huge pickup for Ohio State. I mean, to be able to get on the board there, with Riley, I always felt it was just a matter of when, not if. But, it's just a very important piece to be able to sit there and try and really get your in-state efforts going. I mean, obviously there were some new names and new places for Ohio State and having to make the adjustments. So, credit to Bowen for being able to close the deal. I mean, because there probably are several Ohio kids that Ohio State wants, and they're probably going to end up at Ohio State. And it's March 12th at the time that we're recording this, and they just haven't necessarily had that impact yet. But there are a few positions more, everything. And we know that offensive line recruiting is so important, especially for Ohio State, which is how things have been through the years. And spoiler alert, I think things are going to end up pretty well under Tyler Bowen, but we're in that odd transitional time. So that's the one concern right there, is just trying to hurry up and play catch up, because maybe some of these kids he wasn't necessarily getting as much reception from when he was at Virginia Tech as he would now be at Ohio State.
Yeah, and that'll be the interesting thing this spring. We've talked about this before, is there will be targets who stay the same. Like, Max Riley was still going to be a big target. Sam Greer is still going to be a big target. We'll get to him in a second. And guys like Champ Smith still going to be a pretty big target for the Buckeyes. But Tyler Bowen's also going to have a chance this spring to go out and evaluate guys and maybe put his own spin on this thing for the Buckeyes in terms of who the prime targets are when we get beyond those couple of guys. This is going to be an O-line class that I think probably needs to take 5, and I think could very easily justify 6. In fact, I think you could justify 6 plus like a guy who maybe in the past would have been like a more of a preferred walk-on type, but maybe like a 7th, like developmental guy, maybe from Ohio, maybe, from around the region somewhere. So they need bodies. They need quality, but they also need quantity. It's not sometimes it's, you just need quality. You only need a few bodies at a certain position. But this needs quantity and quality. So that'll be a big thing. But with Riley, I mean, do we have his,
You do.
Some huddle film, and we can just kind of talk about him a little bit. So I'll tell you who he reminds me of, who I think he's kind of in the similar mold of. To me, he's in the in the similar mold of a Luke Montgomery. He plays a lot of tackle in high school. Will that change? He can play guard. I believe he's even working on snapping. So he can play up and down an offensive line, tackle, guard. But like Montgomery, he's got the feet of a tackle, but he may not have the prototype length of a tackle, which may better suit him, again, to play somewhere on the interior, much like what we've seen out of Luke Montgomery. And quite frankly, not much unlike what we saw out of Donovan Jackson, who was another guy who played tackle and has really good feet, but maybe isn't that ideal 6'6" with length tackle body. So I think Max Riley brings a ton of versatility to this offensive line in the future. He's going to, again, up and down. These guys are super valuable. If you questioned whether versatility was a real thing on the offensive line, I think you probably had that answered this past fall by Ohio State. If any team would ever convince you of the importance of versatility on an offensive line, it had to be this Ohio State team, right, Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely. Just the necessity for versatility and to be able to work things out. And a year ago, we were probably talking about who's number 6 and number 7 on the offensive line, not knowing that it was going to be that important to be able to shuffle pieces around. And we had guys probably at different positions than they ended up finishing the season at. Certainly Donovan Jackson, Carson Hinsman. Oh, well, they're going to be able to slide him to guard because of bringing in Seth McLaughlin. And that was great until he got hurt prior to Indiana. But I think your Luke Montgomery comparison for Max Riley is great. I had kind of spent a little time before we hit go on this trying to think of it. Not that I'm not a big comps guy, so I never really get into that. But I think that is a pretty solid comp in terms of, he's got some tackle traits, but he might have more of a guard body. But by having those tackle traits, you never know if he has to pinch hit or something like that, and what may come out of it. I mean, I know that everybody is going to ring the alarm bells about tackle. Ohio State needs tackles. Yes, that's true. But, I think that having somebody who can play, and we get a little bit loose by talking about 4 positions. We know left and right is playing in reverse. So saying somebody can play 4 positions is maybe a little disingenuous. I mean, you can pick it up or whatever, but somebody who can play 2 positions, whether or not you decide to put them on the left or you decide to put them on the right, I think that's a big win.
Yeah, and Riley's experience is playing on the left side, so I'm sure that's where he'll start. But Ohio State does have a fairly long history now of cross training. They do like to cross train left and right side with several guys. I mean, we've seen that with a lot of their guards on this last, Austin Sierravell, Luke Montgomery. They've been doing it with Ian Moore at tackle. So we'll see, what that holds for Max Riley if they do that with him as well. But he's been a left side guy in high school. But love the feet, love the athleticism, the ability to get out into the second level, get out and execute blocks in space. He's a tough, smart player. So a lot of good traits there. And then we just see, you let him get into the program and you put the pieces together. You're bringing him in with presumably 4 or 5 other guys, plus what you've got on the roster already. So it's playing Tetris a little bit there with the offensive line. But I think he's a guy who not only is a very good talent, but he's a guy who doesn't preclude you from recruiting anything else. Like, he's not like, oh, well, we've got our this now. No, you can still go grab your tackles, your guards. You don't have to worry about Max Riley necessarily blocking anything for you because he is so versatile. So I think that's a great first pickup for the Buckeyes. Now, they lose Adam Guthrie to Clemson this week as well. And, I don't know this to be true. Okay. So I'm going to, it's not like tinfoil hat here, but I'm going to speculate just a little bit here. I don't think the Guthrie and Riley commitments being so close together was a total coincidence. I tend to believe that was a situation of Clemson was probably going to get one and Ohio State was probably going to get one. And once it became clear where one was going, it made it even easier for the other one. But that's just my speculation. We'll see if we get the story out of that at some point down the road. A lot of times those things come out, maybe even after signing day. But they do lose Adam Guthrie to Clemson. And look, we talked about this on the site. I was asked specifically about these in-state linemen a few weeks ago. And essentially what I said was Max Riley feeling really good still, despite all the chaos with the offensive line's position and offensive staff shuffling and everything else. I had Guthrie as a toss-up. Guthrie was a guy they were a little late offering initially. They didn't have the long-standing relationship that they had with Riley or that they have right now with Sam Greer. Guthrie also a little bit of a different kid in terms of was always a little more open to looking out of state, out of area. Some of these other guys have been kind of Big Ten-ish heavy. If you look at somebody like a Sam Greer's got a lot of Big Ten schools. Adam Guthrie was looking very much all over the country. So there was always the risk that this could happen. And then you throw in that, new O-line coach, not a whole lot of time there to really get him back onto campus and get things going in a positive direction. And so you lose him to Clemson. Kevin, I guess just how much does this one sting? It's early, but yet, this is an in-state guy with 4-star prospect, has talent, plays tackle, which I know everyone loves. So kind of how do you assess this in terms of, possible damage to this class? How salvageable, are things now?
I'm not going to undersell Guthrie because a couple months ago, you're just listing everybody off and this is how it's all going to fall. And when a piece doesn't fall like that, suddenly you can't be, well, he wasn't any good anyway. That's just dishonest. So, it stings. More than a couple of friends messaged me with, WTF and everything else that was going on at that point. And I was like, well, who leads at this point. And, Clemson has had some success in the state of Ohio one way or the other, whether or not it was due to incompetence of an assistant coach in terms of recruiting or whatever reason. So, I think that with having the coaching change, it's going to reshuffle the deck a little bit. So maybe there was more of a potential of this happening, but when you reshuffle the deck, does that mean that he's able to go into the state of Virginia or the state of Maryland and able to pull somebody that maybe we weren't talking about 8 weeks ago or something like that? We just don't know. Now, the fact that, we've not talked about the next piece, that Clemson is really seemingly putting a lot of effort into the state of Ohio. You don't want to let Clemson get a toehold. Dabo suddenly found out that NIL is a thing and they're starting to get kids. And I'm not saying anybody is just a cash play, but they really kind of struggled when Dabo was, too godly to sully his hands with NIL and everything else.
The no early official visits, I think, went out the window too.
Exactly. They just had a huge recruiting.
It's funny, all these principals and then all of a sudden, actually, start having a couple of 3 and 4 loss seasons and kind of see how that changes.
They backdoored their way into the playoff by beating SMU. That whole, the ACC wheel of mediocrity that was there for that and everything else. So, I think there's some concern. I think you keep swinging there unless you sit there and you look at your board and, the board that Mark Pantoni guards is, maybe different than the board than what it is that you and I are looking at. So, it's just kind of wait and see. But it's better that this happened like the first week of March than like the first week of October.
No question. It's better to know now. And then you decide like, okay, do we want to keep at it there or do we just have to move on? And here's what this does. this guy was super important regardless, but it really makes Sam Greer important. The Akron Hoban tackle, who's actually my number one lineman in Ohio. I just think the upside there as a pure tackle, basketball athleticism, there's a lot to like there. I've had him as my number one lineman since the beginning of the cycle. So in Ohio. So this makes Sam Greer very important. The good news is I think they're in good shape with Sam Greer. Is it done? No. Michigan's been in there. It doesn't feel like Penn State's as much in there as they were maybe at the beginning of the process, but Michigan is in there. The school, it seems to be making a real chart. Like Florida State is really trying to get Sam Greer. And I get it because Sam's a great player, but it is interesting that Florida State, it just seems like very, very aggressive with trying to get Sam Greer. They've had him on campus. I believe they're going to get him back on campus at some point in the spring. And then, they shot little videos for him as they took the practice field recently. They had players kind of like coaches running onto the field and they did like a little video, like shout out or something. And so they've been very creative with their pursuit of Sam Greer. So that may be something to watch, but Sam continues to get back to Ohio State, continues to make the visits. Told me that the Fry thing was kind of impactful for him, but then connected very quickly with Tyler Bowen. And I think that was a good hire for Ohio State on the Sam Greer front. So that piece of the puzzle becomes extra important. And again, I was asked on the site, we do our chats, we do, other things. And I was asked on the site, kind of when Bowen was announced or when it was announced, he would be the next guy. I was like, okay, what does this look like now with Ohio? And I said, well, at the time you had the three offers out. You had Riley, Guthrie, and Greer. I said, can he get all three? I mean, he could, but I said, he's got to get 2 out of 3. Like you got to get 2 out of 3. So now it's been split. It's 1-1. So he's got to get Sam Greer now. If you have Greer and Riley with still, I think, in very good standing with Champ Smith out of Florida, I think they're in a very solid spot there. That can lay a foundation to a very, very good offensive line class.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, once Ohio State signs its class, does it really matter where they're from? I guess in a matter of homesickness and some stuff like that. But you're just trying to fit pieces into the puzzle that are going to work best. And Sam Greer, I always joke because the first time I ever heard his name was him playing basketball. And, he was out there as like a true freshman and just, balling in the state championship game. So I always was like, well, just as long as he doesn't stick with basketball, I guess everything's going to be fine. But he's critical to how this class is going to be put together. I mean, I would expect Tyler Bowen to get to spend some time in lovely Vero Beach, Florida. We have been there to check out TJ Alford. So yeah, you got to kind of make sure that you're redoubling your efforts some places and you got to recruit the guys that you got. And at this point, in terms of offensive line, it's only Max Riley, but school's open for business coming up here soon with as you had mentioned with the spring practice visits. And then before you know it, you're into that first official visit window.
And there's some kids in Ohio that haven't been offered yet that they're looking at. And so we'll see if that, changes. The spring evaluation period will be nice there. They'll be able to go up to these high schools in Ohio and watch these guys work out, see if there's anything that clicks there to get an offer out. But they'll also probably be pushing those guys to camp in June and kind of get a final evaluation. One guy I think to watch is Mason Wilhelm from St. Ed's, legacy prospect, interior guy, center guard, but a guy that has picked up some steam here. And maybe that's, we talk about like, 6th or 7th guys in the class, like, expanding it, bringing in some Ohio guy. Maybe that's an angle there where he's like, a 6th or 7th addition to the class. That could be possible. It certainly feels like he wants the offer. He's been down. He's going to be down again. So they're keeping an eye there. But this is probably going to get more confusing before it gets more clear, if that makes any sense. Like, I think the spring evaluation period is going to bring some new names out of the woodwork. It's going to shuffle things around. It's going to make things a little more confusing than it is maybe right now. And then on the other side of that, we'll start to get a little more clarity once Tyler Bowen is able to kind of really get his hands around this recruiting class. But Guthrie was not the only player that Ohio State lost to Clemson. Caden Gebhardt, a very good safety prospect from Olentangy, commits to Clemson as well. That one, not stunning in terms of where the trend was. I mean, Clemson has done a very good job with Caden, so it wasn't like completely out of left field. I still think people expected that you would get the kid from Olentangy. So this one's interesting to me on a few fronts, but the most interesting subplot I think right now is safety recruiting is going to be important in this class. Spoiler alert, you're not going to have Caleb Downs more than one more year. Malik Hartford is already year 3, believe it or not. Time flies. Jalen McLean's already year 2. And the 26 class will arrive for Jalen McLean's 3rd year. And then you've got some other guys, Fahim Delane, obviously, I think is going to be a tremendous player, but you need some bodies in that safety room. You've lost some guys to the portal. You've had some successes there as well with guys going to be going to the NFL. So you have an in-state guy in Caden Gebhardt, 20 minutes from campus. And is he the number one safety on their board? No, he's not. But here's where it gets interesting for me. You're chasing 2 guys in Braylon Womack from Mississippi and Blaine Bishop from Louisiana. You want to talk? We laughed at the Alabama stuff last year with Offord and for God's sake, and great Zion Grady. We laughed at that because it was just so off the wall that they were in the weeds in Alabama. And now your 2 top safety prospects are from Mississippi and Louisiana. Maybe now that they've actually got a kid from Alabama, maybe the 2 least successful states in the union that Ohio State's recruited over the years. Yet you're getting officials from both. Everyone thinks you're in the top 2 or 3 for both. But yet you're relying on Mississippi and Louisiana. How precarious, I guess, of a situation is this right now with safety recruiting?
I was a little shocked when I saw Gebhardt commit to Clemson at the point that he did. He was part of the big recruiting weekend they had too. You get caught up in the moment, and I'm not saying that he's anything but 100% locked in to Clemson at this moment. I mean, the smile, the afterglow, it's all there still at this point. But now to sit there and look at your top 2 targets being, very much in the deep South, you have to go back to Jonathan Wells in Louisiana. Mississippi's even more complicated. I mean, I guess we can technically say Corey Smith because he was at Scuba Tech over there at East Mississippi JUCO, even though he was an Ohio kid.
Yeah,
places where you have had no success whatsoever in terms of recruiting. And really, you don't even get that involved because it's you only have, 100 units of energy. And let's make this like the video game. You only have so many units of energy to spend on recruiting. Why are we even going to bother when kid's going to go to Alabama or Ole Miss or somewhere like that anyway? Back to Gebhardt. I just certainly hope that it's not a matter of, his proximity allowed for a little complacency in terms of the pursuit on him or whatever. Again, credit to Clemson for getting in there and, making things happen. Now, what happens if Ohio State gets CJ Santa? If then it's does one look to maybe go with the other? I mean, do you end up having some sort of pendulum swing there? We're getting way ahead of ourselves at that point. But
and they're in a great spot for CJ. So that looks like that's going to happen for them at some point. When next week, next month, October. But that's looking good. So yeah, to your point, that's going to be interesting. But yeah, I mean, you got Blaine Bradford, who's, 5-star safety from Baton Rouge, and you're recruiting against LSU for. And then look, these aren't the only guys that like, I'm not like, they haven't just like
that or bust.
Right. They haven't narrowed themselves to that. I'm not saying that. So let me quickly, put that to bed. There are other targets. I'm not saying that there aren't any other targets. You're talking about like Joey O'Brien, Jet Washington. There's a bunch of guys are trying to get on campus for officials and make their moves with. I'm not saying there aren't, but those are their top two right now. And so it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see where we go on Southern Swing, because we have been to those states before, but I think it's only been a one-off for both. We went to New Orleans last year.
Jakeem Stewart.
And once upon a time, we went to suburban Jackson, right? We're just outside of Jackson for Cam Akers, who was kind enough to invite us into his home on a weekend to help our travel move along a little bit more smoothly.
We did the interview out on the back patio. It was a very nice patio, and I remember I remember that well, but I can't tell you how old I am. I mean, just to give you an idea of where the mental breakdown starts.
Yes. I'm sure Cam Akers is not watching or listening to this, but we'll still shout out Cam Akers for that and wish him continued success in the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see if we're hitting two of these obscure places for us on the same trip, because that's the way it's trending right now. But yeah, I mean, so safety recruiting in a year where they really need to get a couple of good ones is interesting right now. I think, again, there's just a lot of unknown there, but they're taking some big swings from all over the country, and we'll kind of see how that comes together. But with Guthrie and Gebhardt, it will be interesting to see what Ohio State does in terms of continued pursuit. It's not like they've lost a kid from Florida or Georgia where it's like, oh gosh, how often do we fly down to, Ocala, Florida or something to figure this out. They're right around the corner. It would not be hard to get them. It would not be hard to get them in on like a secret visit, even like at some point, if things get really tense, it wouldn't be hard to like swing them down at any time in the middle of the week and just, come check things out quietly without any fanfare. So they're in a position where if they want to continue to pursue, they can, and it wouldn't be that difficult or burdensome on their resources. So we'll see what they do there. The last thing I want to hit on here before we log off, Elbert Hill, Rock Hill, top 5-star corner, Akron Hoban, number 1 player in Ohio, maybe the number 1 player on the Ohio State recruiting board, period. Lots and lots of drama, lots and lots of stress caused by a tweet on Tuesday. Rock released 4 official visits. They were all like out of state. It was USC, Oregon, Alabama, and why in the world am I blanking on the fourth? Not Ohio State.
I was going to say the fourth one was not Ohio State.
Not Ohio State. And so that caused quite a buzz amongst Ohio State fans who always take things like this in stride, of course. But no, it's LSU is the fourth. Sorry. So yes, wasn't maybe taken very well by some Ohio State fans on social media, as is often the case. I'm here to tell everyone to take a deep breath, relax, count to 3. I tell my soon-to-be 4-year-old when she gets upset and she can't kind of control herself, like, take a deep breath, count to 3, reset. Okay, we all good? Okay. He's going to visit Ohio State officially. It's going to get set up. I've confirmed this with Rock. I've confirmed this on Ohio State's end. So relax. Tim Walton did not forget about him. Tim Walton did not forget that there's a 5-star corner 2 hours from Columbus. He's been very much on top of this. Ohio State has not gotten complacent here. They are not being stingy on the NIL front and allowing other programs to come in. Now, other programs are certainly coming in with, as the great Will Wade would say, strong ass offers. But that is not because Ohio State is like not fully grasping the importance of Elbert Hill. So he's going to make an official visit to Ohio State. That's going to get scheduled. We'll see when he schedules it for, but that's going to happen. Ohio State's not out. I think people were implying on Twitter that, X, whatever we're calling it these days, that Ohio State was out. They're not out. In fact, Ohio State is still my pick to land Rock Hill. Kevin, how are you feeling about this right now? And, is this getting, are we on yellow alert, orange alert, red alert? I mean, no alert. What do you think right now?
No alert, in my opinion. I think I don't think there's any reason to worry. Where he's not going to be taking a bunch of unofficials? These other 4 schools during spring practice and everything else. I mean, it's pretty easy drive to Columbus. So I'm not here to dictate his schedule to him, but I expect him to visit at least once, if not more, at that point. Ohio State has the hometown advantage. He's familiar. He's been to Ohio State multiple times. I remember giving him a hard time one time because he was wearing, it wasn't a Michigan blue. It was more of like a Duke blue jacket. I'm like, they're going to have to get you a red jacket or something, because it was during a game visit. He found that to be pretty funny, but yeah, it was one of those things of where, he set up the out of town visits because there's probably a lot more moving parts to that rather than, driving down. I mean, I guess technically you could fly. I mean, I do hate driving after a Southern swing. I don't want to drive for like 3 months, but no reason to be concerned. Nothing materially has changed in his recruitment whatsoever.
And look, this is a new era with NIL where, especially look like a school like Oregon, who historically there's been some battles with Ohio State and Oregon, but historically it's just not been as serious, I guess. They were, how many times have they played each other outside of being conference foes? I mean, over the years, 2 or 3 times in the last 25, 30 years.
Ohio State was 9-0 against them. Then it was 9
over 100 years, though, right?
I mean, a lot of that we're getting back into like the 30s. I only remember that from writing preview stories.
So now they're in a situation where like they play each other twice last year. Even years where they're not on the regular season schedule, it feels like they're going to play each other like once a year, just automatically moving forward. They're conference rivals now. It behooves Oregon to put pressure on Ohio State in Ohio. And how do you do that? Well, you do that with NIL. It's the same. That's how Ohio State puts pressure on Georgia for kids from Atlanta. That's how Ohio State puts pressure on Miami and Florida for kids from South Florida. Like, that's how this works now. You put pressure on your out of state, especially out of region rivals, recruiting rivals, with NIL, and you force other programs into a decision. And so that's what we're going to see with Ohio kids moving forward. We are going to see, and we're seeing it with Chris Henry, obviously, who's a transplanted Ohio kid now in California. We're going to see it with, spoiler alert, we're going to see it with Jameer Brown in 2027. Jameer Brown's a freaking superstar. We're going to see it with Jameer Brown. We're going to see some wild rumors thrown around with Jameer Brown and what other schools may be offering it. So that's just the reality of this now. But Ohio State understands that. Again, I've been told several times they are not, they're not going to let money dictate, how hard they recruit a guy like Elbert Hill or a Jameer Brown or a Chris Henry Jr. Like, they're just not going to get complacent on that front. So, but that is the new reality. So, when the Oregon stuff starts coming out with Rock or Alabama or, and when it continues with Jameer Brown in 2027, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised. So that's the new reality we're in, Kevin. And again, but it works both ways, right? I mean, Ohio State can go and they can put some really nice offers together for kids from Southern California or from Atlanta or from Miami, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, Ohio State has done well recruiting nationally. I mean, in the NIL era, prior to the NIL era, I mean, I think that, I think last year was just a different type of year when so much of the pie had to be used at home to be able to keep a team full of draft eligible guys together. I think that, you're looking at a team that's returning 3 defensive starters, a little harder to determine what, who really was a starter on offense. I mean, a couple receivers. I mean, you got whatever, but you're going to be able to spread the money out a little bit more in terms of the offers. And in Ohio State had, again, I'm going to use the Will Wade quote too, some strong ass offers out there last year, and some of them just didn't come home. David Sanders, but it is what it is, and you continue to keep swinging, and Ohio State wins more recruiting battles than it loses, if we're being honest with ourselves. And again, I know that when you're talking about a 25 to 30 man class generally, and I know we got to start getting away from those numbers with whatever the hell we're getting with in scholarship numbers at this point. But and you're offering 150 offers, you're going to lose more than you're going to win. But how many of those offers are really committable or whatever? Ohio State does a really good job of going all in on kids that it really wants to land. I mean, we can sit there and see the number, whatever in the top 5 of the nation. Ohio State is one of the offers there. Ohio State's going to pursue, but nobody really expected Ohio State to land that kid.
Yeah. So that's the latest in Ohio. Again, bit of a mixed bag right now as the coaching staff kind of gets settled in, but ultimately, Max Riley in, still feel good about Sam Greer, still feel good about Rock Hill. Those are obviously guys they have to get. And we'll see what happens, I guess, with some of the other guys who have either committed elsewhere, or we'll see what happens in terms of, again, I've said this a few times. I know I'm a broken record. Spring evaluation period is going to be very interesting. You have so many new sets of eyeballs now who are going to be possibly altering the boards for Ohio State. It's not a given that Matt Patricia and Jim Knowles see the same players the same way. It's certainly not a given that Tyler Bowen and Justin Fry will see the same players the same way. So let's see how things go here the next 6 to 8 weeks in terms of new evaluations. See, they're getting a lot of guys on campus in March and April, a lot of big names on campus. A lot of big names are setting their June officials for Ohio State. We'll keep you updated as quickly as we can on the BuckeyeHuddle.com message board with visitor lists and news as things arrive. But it's about to get serious. It's the time of year where recruiting news starts to pop off after you pull yourself out of January and February and early March, and we get into the visit part of the calendar. So stay tuned to BuckeyeHuddle.com for up-to-date information. We'll also try and knock out these now that we're back from the combine. The season's over. We got a lot more availability to knock these shows out. So we'll do more recruiting shows here over the next several months. But appreciate everyone's support. Appreciate everyone watching and listening. And we will talk to you again very soon.